Good morning and welcome to Thursday's edition of Everything Yesterday This Morning. I am your host, literally Heather. The U.S. Central Bank has announced its biggest interest rate increase in more than 2 decades as it toughens its fight against fast rising prices. The Federal Reserve said it was lifting its benchmark interest rate by half a percentage point to a range of 0.75% to 1% after a smaller rise in March. With U.S. inflation at a 40-year high, further hikes are expected. India's central bank also announced a surprise increase to its benchmark rate, and Australia's central bank recently enacted its first interest rate hike in more than a decade. Because when you hold the reserve currency and 7 people have the ultimate and unregulated control over that currency, you have a ripple effect across the globe. The Bank of England is also widely expected to raise rates on Thursday, which would be the 4th increase since December. Jerome Powell's statement following the decision was, quote, "Inflation is much too high, and we understand the hardship it is causing. We're moving to expeditiously bring it back down. By raising rates, banks will make it more expensive for people, businesses, and governments to borrow. They expect to cool demand for goods and services in an attempt to ease inflation. The big problem with that, though, is their actions risk triggering a sharp economic slowdown." In our book club, we're currently reading End the Fed by Ron Paul, and I kid you not, it falls directly in line with what's taking place right now. It's as if we learned nothing from history. Some things I think that might be even worse for us that are different than what took place before. The lockdowns we experienced, the destruction of the supply chain were not present when this book was written. In addition to that, although we were in a war, our dependent imports affected by that war were minimal. We were able to circumvent what we got from Iraq and Afghanistan in oil with Russia, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. The Russian-Ukraine war, however, provides a significant amount of imports to the United States, and those have been eliminated. Things like wheat, fertilizer, oil. We got some oil from Russia. So inflation hit 8.5% in March, which is the sharpest annual rate since 1981. The central bank's target is 2%. Many economists say they've responded too late, and that if they try to correct the error with another error, like shock the economy with large interest rate increases, which is exactly what they're doing, I think they'll pay a pretty big price in terms of a probable recession from that. The rate increase they announced yesterday was a unanimous decision. In addition, not with it this morning. In addition, the bank detailed plans to remove economic support by winding down its balance sheet, which swelled during the pandemic as it purchased assets, including government debt and mortgage-backed securities, to boost the economy. How will these rate increases affect you? If you have a balance on your credit card, you will see a hike in about 1 or 2 business billing cycles on the interest rate. If you can repay your card balance in full, you can avoid getting hit with extra interest charges. If this is not possible, you might be able to do a balance transfer if you're eligible. Adjustable rate mortgages could become more expensive. If you have a fixed rate mortgage, this rate increase will not affect you. But if you have an adjustable rate loan, that's a different story. ARMs will allow you to lock in your starting rate for a period of time, typically 3, 5, or 7 years. And after that initial period has expired, your rate moves along with the financial index. As a result, these rising interest rates are likely to lead to your mortgage costs going up. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do if you have an ARM. You may want to look into refinancing into a fixed rate mortgage so you can gain more certainty about how much you'll pay. Refinancing debt may no longer be worth it. As mentioned above, refinancing a mortgage loan has already become much more expensive compared with last year, and these rates will likely go up further thanks to the Fed. The free market should be free. 7 people should not have this much unregulated control. This is the biggest conversation that no one is having. Intuit, the owner of TurboTax, has agreed to pay $141 million in a settlement with all 50 states for allegedly steering millions of low-income Americans away from its free tax filing services. Intuit must also suspend its free ad campaign because it falsely lured customers with the promise of free taxpayer preparation services. Intuit admitted no wrongdoing as a part of the agreement, and it expects minimal impact to its business from the changes demanded in the future. In 2019, ProPublica published a report that accused the company of steering eligible clients away from federally supported tax filing products by making them difficult to find in the searches and instead directing them towards the paid version of the company's filing services. Filers who used TurboTax Free Edition for tax years 2016 through 2018 will be mailed a check for approximately $30 for each year they were charged when they should have been able to use free services. Food banks around the country are struggling with the rise in food costs and supply chain issues. About 65% of the 200 food banks in the Feeding America network reported seeing a greater demand for food assistance in March compared with the previous month. With an average increase of 15% more people, according to the latest data from the nation's largest hunger relief organization. About 30% of food banks said that they had served the same number of clients. The share of food banks experiencing increased demand has more than doubled since December. The cost of food eaten at home jumped 10% over the year ending in March. Meat soared 14.8%, while milk increased 13.3%. Eggs rose 11.2%, while fresh fruits became 10.1% more expensive. Rice rose 8.6%, and bread cost 7.1% more. Food banks are buying nearly as much food as they did in 2021, but are paying 40% more for purchases. According to the Feeding America, God, I can't fucking talk. According to Feeding America, which has more than 60,000 food pantries, meal programs, and partner agencies in its network, the organization is projecting that it will suffer a 20% decrease in donations from food manufacturers and a 45% drop in food provided by the federal government in fiscal year 2022. Escalating prices and reduced supplies are forcing many food banks to restrict how much the pantries they serve are allowed to order. For example, a case of canned corn now costs $26, up from $13 2 years ago. This has led the food bank to limit orders up to 20 cases per pantry, down from 30 cases last year. But please, send more humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. Their citizens are way more important than our own. Speaking of Ukraine, Biden pressed Congress to pass his massive $33 billion Ukraine aid package during a visit to Lockheed Martin. The plant in Troy, Alabama manufactures Javelin anti-tank missiles. Biden said, quote, "We built the weapons and equipment that helped defend freedom and sovereignty in Europe years ago. That's true again today." Among the military items being considered are defensive systems that protect troops on the ground, personal combat gear and warning systems. Israel and the United Kingdom both announced they are planning on increasing their military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine as well. Amber Heard took the stand yesterday to tell her side of the story about the alleged abuse from Johnny Depp. I have many opinions with regards to the testimony, but this is not the place for that. I bring it up, though, because it has been testified that in the divorce settlement, Amber was to distribute the $7 million in the amount of $3.5 million to both the ACLU and the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, but she pocketed it. Yesterday, though, she finally distributed her settlement after hiring her new PR team in the middle of her trial. I have watched and listened to all 15 days of the trial while I work and chauffeur my kids around, and while it's definitely soap opera drama, it is compelling for a few different reasons. If you have been or known anyone who is a victim of domestic abuse, you might find it interesting. Jobless claims rose to 200,000 last week, which is the highest level since February. Figures released Thursday by the Labor Department show that applications for the week ended April 30th climbed to 200,000 from an upwardly revised 181,000 a week earlier, missing the 182,000 forecast. So, in other words, instead of 182,000, it was 200,000. So they were off by, 18,000. Continuing claims of the number of Americans who are consecutively receiving unemployment aid fell to 1.38 million, a decrease of 19,000 the week before. Holy bananas, you guys. The report shows that roughly 1.47 million Americans were collecting jobless benefits for the week ending in April 16th. Earlier this week, the Labor Department reported that 4.5 million Americans, or about 3% of the workforce, quit their jobs in March. Pre-pandemic levels typically hovered around 3.6 million. The number of job openings rose to 11.5 million by the end of March. This report also showed that worker productivity fell at the steepest pace since 1947 in the first quarter of the year, while growth in unit labor costs surged, showcasing how rising wage pressures could continue to fuel sky-high inflation. Non-farm productivity, which measures hourly output per worker, plunged at a 7.5% annualized rate in the first 3 months of the year. Data for the end of 2021 was also revised to slightly lower to show that productivity grew at a 6.3% rate, down from the originally reported 6.6%. Taiwan signaled that it had abandoned a plan to buy advanced new anti-submarine warfare helicopters from the United States, saying that they were too expensive. The price is too high, beyond the scope of our country's ability, Defense Minister Chiu Kyo-chang mentioned the helicopter case first. 2 other arms purchases have also been delayed. The M109A6 medium self-propelled howitzer artillery system and mobile Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. The Raytheon Stingers are in hot demand in Ukraine, but U.S. supplies have shrunk, and there are significant hurdles to producing more of the anti-aircraft weapons. Taiwan is undertaking a military modernization program at the encouragement of the United States to improve its capabilities to fend off a Chinese attack, including with precision weapons like missiles. China has been ramping up its own military modernization and pressure against Taiwan as it seeks to force the democratically governed island to accept Beijing's rule. 8 Chinese naval vessels, including the aircraft carrier the Liaoning, I'm horrible with these names, you guys, passed between islands in Japan's southern Okinawa chain on Monday, an area that is to Taiwan's northeast. All of this, coupled with China's recent meeting discussing the circumvention of potential sanctions, based off of watching what is going on with Ukraine, is something to keep an eye on. That is your Thursday edition of Everything Yesterday This Morning. I love you guys. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow morning.